Part 47. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 461. Chapter 461 The Emperor Awakens. The day when the little fish soared. The elders of the Lingyuan sect have ascended. The head of the Sanking sect has been promoted. This made the powerful group cry on the spot. Who is riding a horse to receive the light so brightly? It is simply more powerful than taking pills. After absorbing only a little bit of the spirit of the gods, he soared. How did they know that it was not just an ascension, it also represented the favor of heaven? After ascending in the future, there will be great benefits in the divine world. The only consolation is that when Mingxian, whose talent is astonishing and famous all over the world, failed. He was unscathed by the 80 thunderbolts, but was completely defeated by the 81 interrogation calamity and had no power to resist. During the calamity of questioning one's mind, he did not betray Xiao Yu'er, nor did he kill his wife to preach. Knowing that it was all an illusion, he still couldn't bear to do it. On their wedding night, he was happy holding the little fish he had found. He abandoned the road and just wanted to keep his little fish happy for the rest of his life. He knew everything was false, but he couldn't raise his sword to Xiao Yu'er and couldn't kill her again, even if it was just an illusion. He was completely defeated in the tribulation of questioning the heart, and was defeated by his inner demon. When Emperor Junhua woke up, his heart was still hurting terribly. "Emperor, you finally woke up," the little Taoist boy breathed a sigh of relief. "If you don't wake up, I will go to find the Emperor of Heaven." "Emperor, is your trip going well? Has your heart been broken?" The little Taoist boy helped the Emperor stand up. Xiao Yu'er's voice and smile flashed before Emperor Junhua's eyes, and he raised his hand to gently caress his heart. The little Taoist boy was slightly frightened. Could it be that the Emperor was defeated? Emperor Junhua didn't say a word. He only heard bursts of Sanskrit sounds outside and asked, "What's the sound outside? Do you remember the little daughter of the first god?" "That's the little girl named Fu Zian." Junhua nodded, vaguely remembering that she was a little girl with fat breasts. "That little girl from Xintian Dao." "Yes, she has come back after all the calamity. Now the emperor is happy and wants to celebrate her success." Junhua frowned slightly. "I'm confused. Why are you celebrating at such a young age? Don't let your pride lead to your temper. The way of heaven has always been a spiritual consciousness that was born and raised by nature. Now that you have become a goddess, you should be well educated." The emperor raised his hand and rubbed the center of his brow. "That's right. After all, they can raise the creation used for sacrifice like a child." Emperor Junhua looked disdainful. "Now, will even the way of heaven be crippled? Are you going to see the first god?" the little child asked in a low voice. The emperor's face suddenly turned cold. "I no longer have the friendship with them that I had back then." Children did not dare to persuade him anymore. Back then, the emperor and the creator were inseparable brothers and sisters. If so, I'm afraid it will break up. They have escaped from the divine realm, so naturally they are not worthy of your worship. It is impossible to say that now that you have met the emperor, you still have to worship the emperor. How can they be as sober as the emperor of God? The emperor has never fallen prey to personal affairs. If you ask me, the most just one is the emperor." The little boy sighed. Junhua's face froze slightly, and he pursed his lips slightly. "There is a thin and dense pain in my heart. Where is Si Mingxing Jun? Master Si Mingxing?" 3 days ago, he suddenly announced that he would be in seclusion. The little boy scratched his head, knowing that Lord Si Mingxing had just left seclusion not long ago. The emperor hummed, raised his feet, and auspicious clouds gathered together, standing on top of the clouds. Seeing the glow and Sanskrit sounds in the distance, the emperor's eyebrows were a little unhappy. "Why is it in such a hurry?" Xiao Xianyi, who was passing by, paused and saluted the emperor. Reporting to Emperor Junhua, it is Xiao Tiandao who does not like the peach blossoms in the divine world. He insists on killing the peach blossoms in Qianghua Palace, so the Emperor of Heaven ordered Xiao Xian to remove the peach blossoms here. Dai Junjun Hua's face turned cold. What a nonsense! How could we remove the peach tree just because she didn't like it? Dai Junjun Hua waved his hand in annoyance and asked Xian Yi to go down. Looking at the bursts of rays of light on the opposite side, he asked, when is the celebration? Tomorrow. Dai Junhua hummed. After looking for Mr. Si Ming seeing, he just happened to go there. Dai Junjunhua drove the clouds all the way to Siming's bedroom quickly, but Siming closed the door tightly. Emperor Junhua did not report the incident, but just kicked down the bronze door of Siming Hall. Si Mingxing Jun was standing behind the door in fear, holding his fortune book. Retreat, Junhua smiled coldly. Siming laughed dryly, I was about to retreat, and the emperor came by chance. Emperor, the changing of the four seasons, the rotation of the sun and the moon, are driven by destiny. When the emperor wrote down the main destiny, time will move forward of course, with strong destiny, there will also be some mistakes. Dai Junjunhua spread his hands and looked at him coldly. Si Ming stammered, Si Ming has neglected his duty if he leaves his hand with the fate book. Si Ming. He didn't dare to hand over the fate book. Before he finished speaking, the emperor's face darkened. With a swish, Si Ming threw the life book into his hand. Then Si Mingxing Jun raised his hand and gave himself a slap, which caused blood to flow from his mouth, and then flied out. Broken through the door and fell to the ground. Emperor, why are you trying to steal the order book? Poof, he spit out a mouthful of blood. He had to add a reasonable drama to himself. Dai Junjunhua's breath was stagnant, as if he didn't expect that Si Ming was actually a drama queen. He had no choice but to raise his hand and open the horoscope. Sure enough, the horoscope is a little different from when he wrote it. From the horoscope he wrote back then, Zhang Xiao was just his tool in the mortal world. Having no thoughts of one's own, no emotions of one's own, let alone touching one's own feelings. And now, the fortune-telling is all messed up. She didn't know when her thoughts sprouted, and she even felt helpless driven by her fate. She began to resist fate. But the gears of fate cannot be controlled. She is being herself soberly while following the fateful plot as fate drives her. Dai Junjunhua's breathing stagnated slightly. No wonder when Mingxian felt Xiao Yu'er separation all the time. Sometimes I hate her like a puppet on strings, losing her mind as soon as she sees Wen Mingxian. Sometimes it shows a different face. In the original horoscope, Xiao Yu'er will be completely convinced by his wife's murder. But she had clearly awakened, knew this clearly, and even knew that she had spiritual roots. She still chose to give herself another chance. She knows it all. Know it all. She still chose herself without hesitation. Dai Junjunhua's hands were trembling and he could not hold his fortune-telling firmly. Tick-tock tick-tock. A teardrop falls on the fortune tree. Dai Junhua felt a sharp pain in his heart, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. A stream of pure spiritual energy dispersed from the sky and the earth. Emperor, Si Mingxing Jun was startled and hurriedly got up from the ground. There is a new soul that has entered the life tree, right? The emperor raised his hand to wipe away the blood. Siming nodded. After the emperor went down, a soul was sent to the destiny tree. That is where the emperor's real love disaster lies. That soul? Where is it? The emperor asked with a hoarse voice and red eyes. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 462. Chapter 462 Looking for her. Si Mingxing Jun frowned. Emperor, there is no trace of that soul. But luckily I ascended and returned to the God realm after all. I can always find out. Mingxing Jun looked at the emperor cautiously. The emperor seems to have been moved. Sima didn't know what to say, but it was self-defeating and made the emperor fail. The emperor lowered his head and looked at the destiny book. Sudden. The golden characters on the life tree actually turned into starlight before his eyes, spreading out bit by bit. What's going on? How could this happen? The emperor was shocked. Sima was startled. Impossible, once the fate book is written, it cannot be changed. Unless. Sima looked a little weird. Unless something. Unless, someone who shouldn't be touched is recorded like. Sima felt a shiver in his heart. The last time he tried to write Xiao Tiandao's fate, it was erased from the fate book. This time, there was a change in the already determined destiny. Now fate begins to erase her existence. Unless she should not exist. Or, no one can know her past. Sima Xingjun's heart trembled, but he did not dare to say it. Like what? The emperor rubbed his eyebrows. It's like heaven and earth don't allow this relationship to appear, so they start to get involved. Sima Xingjun mentioned it vaguely. The emperor let out a sigh. I am not the god of creation. He waved his hand. I guess I can't find anything. He planned to leave. Before leaving, Lord Sima hesitated for a moment and advised, Emperor, you have returned to the god realm, what are you going to do with her again? It's better to just forget about it, so that you can return to the Great Road. Dai Junjunhua paused in his steps. Why didn't he understand? Only by forgetting both sides can he return to the road and find his true heart. Can. Dai Junjunhua's mouth was full of bitterness, and he touched the jade pendant covered with fine lines around his waist. He then went to look for Yu Lao. Yu Lao wanted to hide when he saw him. Dai Junjunhua grabbed Yu Lao's beard, and Yu Lao walked out with a grimace. Emperor. Yu Lao's face was filled with regret. He had known that he would go out and hide and never come back. Seeing his dejected look, Yu Lao couldn't help but feel weak in his heart. Emperor, it is impossible for you and her. You and she are destined to suffer a calamity, so don't look for it. She shouldn't have had an affair with you. Yu Lao also didn't expect that the two of them had experienced the same calamity as each other. Dai Junjunhua has always been aloof. At this moment, he was holding the red thread in Yu Lao's hand. Tie it again, tie it once for me. Emperor Junhua's throat was hoarse and his voice was hoarse. Yu Lao looked pale and shook his head in horror. Emperor, I can't tie this little old man up. How dare he tie him up? Emperor, I'll tell you the truth, little old man. Yu Lao struggled, and finally sighed. Muttered in a low voice, Emperor, there is a cause and effect. You understand it's really God's will, you have a calamity, but this calamity has never been fulfilled. You write your own destiny and keep yourself from being moved. And in the love crisis, you continue to temper the other girl. But just because you wrote this destiny and needed to sharpen the other person, you attracted her because God also needs her to be emotionless. She needs to cut off her love and soar into the sky. She was specially sent to the emperor. Yu Lao sighed, destiny is written in advance, but the heart is uncontrollable. During the calamity, two red threads that had nothing to do with each other suddenly became entangled with each other and became inseparable. Yu Lao took out two threads from his arms. On the eve of your wedding, the two threads spontaneously became entangled. The sky of Yu Lao Palace was covered with dark clouds and thunder continued, and a thunder directly split the Moon Palace in half. Yu Lao looked a little frightened. The two red lines were so charred that they couldn't be separated. The emperor frowned and looked, and sure enough, there was a layer of black and white lightning on the red line. At that time, Yu Lao knew in his heart that it was going to be over, but he was afraid that he should not be too emotional. Dai Junjunhua pinched the red thread, and the two threads were flowing with light. The hand was warm and had a bit of tingling feeling. It is the feeling of thunder and lightning passing through the palm of the hand. The two lines were extremely smooth. He pursed his lips and looked deeply at them. It's Xiao Yuer chose him. Give him a chance. That night, Xiao Yuer said, I'll give you a chance. A chance. That he had given up with his own hands. Why are there cuts on this line? The emperor asked. Yu Lao touched the sweat on his forehead and said, thunder struck the red line that day. Who knew that only one day had passed, and it was exactly night in the human world. These two entangled red threads were suddenly cut off. Without any warning, they were cut off. Yu Lao glanced at the emperor secretly. As expected, the emperor's face was extremely ugly. The emperor held the red thread tightly. Shortness of breath. He pursed his lips and grabbed the two red threads and tried to tie them back up. Who knows, no matter how you tie the knot, the two threads will unravel spontaneously. The emperor couldn't help but use some spiritual power to try to tie the thread back. Suddenly dark clouds gathered in the sky, and rolling thunder gathered from the clouds. Hideous power descended from the sky. Yu Lao knelt on the ground with a thud. Emperor, no, there are still 8,000 red-lined boys in the Moon Palace. The Moon Palace has been destroyed once, and it cannot be destroyed a second time. Besides, the red thread is moved by the heart. If the heart is dead, the red thread cannot be tied. Yu Lao shouted loudly. The emperor smiled bitterly. It's in the heart, not in the red line, nor in the horoscope. It was him who lost his newlywed wife with his own hands. You know who she is? Right. After a long time, the emperor asked in a low voice. Yu Lao knelt on the ground, bending deeper. He did not dare to say the other person's name. Okay, let's go. I will not harm your Moon Palace. The emperor closed his eyes slightly and took a deep breath. Emperor, the past means that there is no fate. Why don't you let it go? Yu Lao advised him when he left. The emperor's face was full of bitterness. Yu Lao, every you have ever met in the God realm will advise them to go down to the next world to experience the taste of love. The Emperor of Heaven has punished you several times, but you can't change it. Now, are there people you dare not persuade? Yu Lao immediately shut up. He didn't dare, he was afraid that he would be struck to death by the nine heavens thunder tribulation. Dai Junjunhua touched his heart and hung two love beans around his neck, which he kept nourished by spiritual energy. When he returned to Jokongtian, the sky was full of glow and the fairy sounds were faint. It was very lively with many gods coming and going. They are all people who came to congratulate me. Everyone wants to take a look at the new way of heaven. It will be a great opportunity if you can gain the favor of heaven or make good friends. In the corner, the two little gods kept avoiding each other, their faces full of fear. Many gods exist in myths, and they don't even dare to look up at them. Zhu Cheng. Isn't it the right time for us to ascend? If we touch any great god, our cultivation will be scattered. The two of them huddled in the corner cautiously. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 463. Chapter 463 The Amazing Young Disciple. Elder Zhu Qing glared, "Don't talk so much, have you found your disciple?" The head of Sanking sect had a headache. Ling Miao ascended only 3 days before us, so why can't we find her? If it doesn't work out, why don't you seek the protection of the elders of the sect? Their Sanking sect also had ancestors who ascended in the past dynasties. It's just that the Lingyun sect and the Sanking sect, which are famous in the mortal world, are in the divine world. It's just a little known little sect. Even for this celebration of the three realms, they are not even worthy of entering the gate of the nine heavens. Hey, does that person who flew over just now look like Wen Mingxian? Elder Zhu Qing's eyes widened. How could it be Wen Mingxian? He was defeated in the Wengzhen tribulation. The elder of the Sanking sect waved his hand, not having a good look at Wen Mingxian who had ruined his disciple. Hush, that's Emperor Junhua, the most virtuous and respected emperor since the beginning of the world, said a little behind him. The two of them immediately stopped talking. These kind of people are not something they can mess with. Zhou Yu, the head of the Sanking sect, searched for it for a long time and finally found the sect in the third heaven. It's just that the sect's situation is not good at the moment. The elders of the sect who had already ascended to the throne were actually standing outside the sect in a rather embarrassed manner, and started arguing with the opposite party. Everyone in the division sect's eyes were red with anger. Master, Zhou Yu was overjoyed. He actually saw his master who had been ascending for many years. The master stared at him blankly for a while before his eyes widened. You have ascended. I remember, my teacher, when you had only mediocre qualifications, I left you to manage the general affairs of the section. It has only been more than 300 years, and you have been promoted? The second brother has not even come up yet. The old man was quite surprised. At that time, he accepted 2 disciples. The eldest disciple was not very talented, so he became the head of the sect and handled the general affairs of the sect. The second disciple had outstanding talents, so he devoted himself to the Tao and guarded the sect in the future. When you can no longer suppress it, then ascend to the divine realm. Zhou Yu rolled his eyes. When one person attains enlightenment, chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. I am lucky to have a good apprentice. Teacher ancestor frowned. Why do chickens and dogs ascend to heaven? Zhou Yu said seriously, my apprentice has ascended and is flying with me. There's still me, Elder Zhu Qing said from behind. He did not go to the Lingyuan section. He was originally a guest elder of the Lingyuan sect, and he was free after ascending. That's ridiculous, what a mess. Teacher ancestor rubbed his brows. His disciple was afraid that he was crazy. As he was talking, a conflict broke out in front of him. Master, what's going on? Zhou Yu asked hurriedly. Teacher ancestor's face turned cold. It's not like they were too bullying. This time Zhukongtian held a grand event. Our Sanking sect was obviously given 3 opportunities to enter it. But they actually came to rob it? The divine world is divided into 9 heavens. Ordinary monks can only enter the first, second, and third heavens after ascension. If you want to enter the upper level, it is even more difficult than climbing to the sky. What's more, go to the 9th heaven to observe the ceremony. That is a great opportunity that has never been encountered in thousands of years. The eyes of a group of people were red with anger. This group of people had never reached the 9th heaven in thousands of years of ascension. Now I had 3 opportunities to watch the ceremony, but they were actually taken away. Everyone in the Sanking sect had red eyes and watched in utter embarrassment as the other party took away the invitation letter in an arrogant manner. Go up to the 9 heavens to observe the ceremony? Are you worthy? Even if you go up there, you won't be able to understand the secrets of heaven. The 9 heavens is the place that all gods and Buddhas yearn for most. It is also the place where it is easiest to understand the secrets of heaven. Kangguya Palace, you are going too far. The Sanking sect was weak and could only watch helplessly as things were taken away. When Zhou Yu saw that his elders were suffering a loss, he immediately became furious. Forget it. There is a backstage in Kangguya Palace. We are all small sects and cannot be offended. Teacher ancestor just felt sorry for his disciple, who finally ascended to the throne and encountered such a bad thing. The ancestor of Kangguya Palace works as an errand in the 9 heavens. It is said that he is a popular person in front of the Emperor of Heaven. The Sanking sect has no backing, so there is no way to provoke him. His teacher ancestor introduced him to the elders of the sect. It is a good thing to have disciples ascending, as they can understand the affairs of the world and increase the number of people. It's a pity that no one is happy today. By the way, you said that one of your disciples has also ascended? He has only practiced for 14 years, the ancestor of the Sanking sect frowned. The Sanking sect actually has such a talented disciple? Yes, I watched her ascend in front of my eyes. Even the disciples ascended thanks to her. Zhou Yu touched the back of his head. He had no hope of ascending in this life, but who knew he would find a good disciple. My disciple tested her and found that she has a fairy spirit body. Everyone in the Sanking sect widened their eyes. Fairy spirit body? That's the god's calamity. No wonder you can't find her. The gods will be entrusted with the immortal spirit body when they come to earth and endure the calamity. This is God's preferential treatment for the gods. Zhou Yu suddenly understood, no wonder he practiced so fast. Elder Zhu Qing also nodded. It seemed that he had not made a mistake. Let's wait outside Zhekongtian first. There is a grand event there and everyone will probably stay there. It's also easy to find people. I just don't know which is responsible for the calamity. There are many gods in the divine world, and they didn't think about the great God. When the gate to the 9 heavens opens, the immortal energy leaked will be beneficial to us. I will take the opportunity to understand it more later. Alas, it's a pity that the invitation was snatched away. Master Xiao sighed. Although Zhou Yu missed Xiao Yuer, the master said it politely, and he followed the elders of the sect to the 9th heaven. Zhu Qing had no family or sect, so he accepted Zhang Xiao's love and became a named elder in the Sanking sect. A total of more than 20 elders of the Sanking sect have died. They were powerful in the mortal world, but in the divine world they can only live with their tails between their legs. The divine realm is divided into 9 heavens, 1 to 3, where ordinary gods live. Mortal sects still exist here. There are no sects when you go up to the 4th heaven. All gods perform their own duties, serve only the 3 realms, and obey the orders of the Emperor of Heaven. The 4th heaven is inhabited by door gods, kitchen gods, etc., all of whom are gods enshrined in the human world. The 5th heaven is inhabited by the god of spring who is in charge of the 4 seasons, as well as the Dragon King, the Lord of Thunder, the Duke of Lightning, and the Queen of Lightning, etc. The 6 heavens are inhabited by the god of war, the god of fire, the god of water who brings rain, etc. The 7th heaven is inhabited by ancient gods. They are ancient gods that only appear in myths. Generally speaking, news about them is rarely heard. On the 8th level, there live the Emperor of Heaven and the Queen Mother who are in charge of the 3 realms. Oh, by the way, there is also Emperor Junhua. Zhou Yu paused. The Emperor of Heaven doesn't live in the 9 heavens. Teacher Ancestor shook his head and said mysteriously, within the 8th heaven, all mortals ascend to immortality. Except for Emperor Junhua, he is the ancient who lived at the same time as the first god. Only the heavenly spirits who are born and nourished by heaven are qualified to live in the 9th heaven. For example, the God who created the world. And, the way of heaven. Teacher Xiao said in a faint tone, these are all too far away from the 3rd heaven. They can only piece together a rough idea from the mouths of high-level gods. Zhou Yu's eyes suddenly widened. Heavenly way. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 464. Chapter 464, The Strongest Backstage in the 3 Realms. The Way of Heaven. Master, how can the Way of Heaven enter the 9th heaven? Isn't that a ubiquitous spiritual consciousness that has been bred since the beginning of the world? Zhou Yu almost rolled off the clouds. Teacher Xiao sighed faintly. It turns out that the Way of Heaven will also fall. A few years ago, the 3 realms were almost destroyed. Come to think of it, there are signs in the human world as well. Zhou Yu thought for a while and nodded. In the past few years, strange beasts have appeared, the world has collapsed, and the world has been in chaos. Everyone spread rumors that the sky was about to collapse, causing a breakdown in order and almost causing a major disaster in the world. Fortunately, the first god gave birth to a new way of heaven. As we all know, the way of heaven will not favor any one of the 3 realms. In order to prevent her from getting close to a certain realm, she has to be thrown into reincarnation at a young age to purify her selfish desires. Today is the celebration feast for her reincarnation. If I can get a chance to see the new way of heaven, I will have no regrets in this life. The elders of the sect were all a little lonely. It's a pity that we can't even get in. We can only try our best to occupy a good position at the gate of Jokongtian. Everyone couldn't help but rush towards Jokongtian. Zhou Yuan's thoughts are no longer in the ninth heaven. He only worries about his little disciples. It turns out that the world of gods is not simple. His young disciple has only been practicing for more than 10 years, compared with these great gods who have been practicing for tens of thousands of years. His disciple is just a baby. Don't bump into big people, don't be bullied by others. Zhou Yuedong looked carefully, but he didn't see the shadow of Xiao Yuer. Quick, 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 I've got a good position for my teacher. Teacher Xiao was quite happy. He managed to squeeze out a few good seats, right in front of the majestic gate of Jokongtian. Looking particularly desolate. Fortunately, they were very happy. The numerous little gods around are all waiting outside the door without invitation letters. Master, you are the one who stole our invitation letter. Zhou Yu pointed at the disciples who came and shouted angrily. I saw them coming in flying Luan, looking so cool. It's shameless to hold our invitation letter. Everyone in the Sanking sect felt humiliated and aggrieved. The leader is True Lord Yuanfeng, who serves in front of the Emperor of Heaven. True Lord Yuanfeng originally only belonged to the fifth heaven. But because he was good at pen and ink and was clever, he gradually worked in front of the Emperor of Heaven to polish his ink, and from time to time wrote oral instructions for the Emperor of Heaven. Later, Zhenjun Yuanfeng also established a sect, which was quite famous in the third heaven. At this moment, the group of disciples who had snatched the invitation letter were nurturing their mouths at the Sanking sect, their eyebrows raised high, their faces full of arrogance. Zhenjun Yuanfeng glanced at the people of the Sanking sect and knew that the other party had no foundation and no gods as a backing, so he let his disciples in indifferently. The more powerful the disciple is, the better it will be for him. Everyone in the Sanking sect was so angry that their eyes turned red. Everyone can see that Master Yuanfeng is allowing his disciples to seize opportunities. Is there any royal law left in the God realm? Zhou Yu was even more unbearable. That's all, just bear with it for now. The world of gods is not as simple as you think. Teacher Ancestor felt uncomfortable. At this moment, they were extremely frustrated. I could only watch them helplessly and walked in with my own opportunity. However, after they entered the ninth heaven, they could only sit inside the door. I belong to the last position, I have just started. After all, there are many gods in the 9 heavens, and each class is distinct. Hey, it would be great if our Sanking sect could also get a backstage. The eyes of the Sanking sect disciples were filled with sadness. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 465. Chapter 465. Welcoming Little Heavenly Deo. Where is it so easy to find the backstage? Apart from practicing, we don't have any skills. In the world of gods, the most indispensable thing is cultivators. Besides, they are not even very good at cultivating. Everyone is somewhat at peace. Zhou Yu frowned and said after a while, hey, I wish I could have diversified the development of my disciples. Hey, your disciple hasn't been found yet, Teacher Xiu asked. 14 years of apprentices, the ancestors of the teacher, looked forward to it. It cannot be said that this is the future hope of their Sanking sect. I never saw her coming here. She didn't like to join in the fun when she was a child. Zhou Yu couldn't help but feel worried. After saying that, he frowned and thought for a while, then asked, Master, since Zhenjun Yuanfeng is so favored, why doesn't he come riding a dragon or a phoenix? After all, the fire phoenix only has a trace of the blood of the phoenix. Nothing. Teacher Xiu's eyes widened, and even the elders were surprised. What nonsense are you talking about? Dragons and phoenixes have the supreme status in the divine world. The dragon and phoenix clans live in the fifth heaven, and they are on an equal footing with True Lord Yuanfeng. And the dragon emperor and phoenix king live in the seventh heaven. They haven't seen anyone for many years. When they travel, Yuan Feng has to kneel down to greet him. Where is he? How dare you ride a dragon and a phoenix? And these two tribes are the most arrogant and will not bow down easily in front of the Emperor of Heaven. Master Zhou shook his head. Although he is called teacher and sister, there are no ugly people in the world of gods. Most people maintain their most satisfactory appearance and condition when they ascend. Actually, they are a group of handsome young men. Zhu Qing and Zhou Yu looked at each other. Zhu Qing's eyes widened. Your disciple seems to have something wrong. The people who greeted her ascension were serious dragons and phoenixes. And covered with glow, they look more majestic than ordinary dragons. You are a country bumpkin, you are not worthy of being a gatekeeper in the 9 heavens, yet you still want to enter the 9 heavens. It's ridiculous. The young disciple of Kangguya Palace looked at the Sanking sect with an arrogant tone. Most people in Kangguya Palace are good at flattering others, but their strength is average. 3 Qing sects are all a group of sword cultivators. Sword cultivators are straightforward and do not build relationships, but their strength is extraordinary. Zhenjun Yuan Feng tried to merge them into Kangguya Palace several times, but they were always rejected by the Sanking sect. After this coming and going, there was resentment. You are lucky to be able to enter Kangguya Palace, but you are ungrateful to be able to be with the 5th level Heavenly Lord. Now, just squat at the door. The disciple of Kangguya Palace snorted coldly. We want to see what's the point of guarding such a broken sect like Sanking section. Several Kangguya Palace disciples laughed and said. In this life, I'm afraid you won't be able to enter the gate of Zhikongtian. After all, Zhikongtian is closed all year round, and only the first god has always entered. Everyone is proud to enter the 9th heaven. Zhou Yu crossed his arms and said, you are so mean that you have to live dependent on others. I don't have any objection, after all, everyone lives differently. But if you want to drag others into trouble, then you shouldn't do it. We, a group of swordsmen, have nothing but pride, so naturally we can't compare to you. Everyone in Kangguya Palace's expressions darkened. They usually hate being called spineless. You guys are tough-minded, so why don't you come in? Sigh, a bunch of dead sword cultivators, not even a supporter. Several disciples spat, and turned around with a sullen face. The 5th level Heavenly Lord Yuan Feng, who was sitting a little ahead, had a cold look on his brows. To say that you are flattering him is not to slap him in the face. At this moment, when he saw several venerables coming in, Zhenjun Yuan Feng couldn't help but smile and came forward to greet them. Even though the other party ignored him, he looked enthusiastic. Holy Lord Yu Yuan, please take a seat in front of me. The Emperor of Heaven has been talking about you for a long time, Zhenjun Yuan Feng said with a fawning smile. This is the Holy Master of the medical immortal valley of the 7th heaven. All Huatuo in the world are his disciples. Holy Lord Yu Yuan has a folding fan in his hand, and he looks carefree. Is Junhua back? Zhenjun Yuan Feng smiled and said, I heard that he went to find Lord Si Mingxing as soon as he came back, and he hasn't returned to Zhizongtian yet. Besides, he has a grudge against those 2 people, so he may not be able to come. Zhenjun Yuan Feng pointed upward. Refers to Shishen and Fujuxiao. Holy Lord Yu Yuan did not comment, and simply said, Zhenjun Yufeng is interested. Zhenjun Yuan Feng raised his eyebrows slightly and welcomed Holy Lord Yu Yuan to the front row. There were many divine monarchs passing by, most of whom cast a disdainful look at him. In the divine world, not only strength is respected, also respects merit. Those who can ascend are all proud, but the only one who relies on flattery is Yuan Feng Zhenjun. To say that he had to shoot horses, most of the gods closed all year round and didn't care. But the sect he founded has a bad reputation. Not long after, everyone sat down. Wow, it's the Dragon King and Phoenix Emperor coming to meet you. From a distance, I heard the sound of dragons and phoenixes singing. The sky is filled with fairy sounds and countless rays of light. This. Zhou Yu saw the phoenix from a distance and was startled. It looks a bit familiar. Elder Zuking secretly pulled his sleeve. This phoenix. How does it look like your apprentice's one? Before he finished speaking, he covered his mouth. Fengde drags his long tail feathers to soar in the ninth heaven, and wherever he goes, the sky is filled with aura. The little spirit guarding outside the nine heavens gate was full of joy. I unexpectedly met Fengde sailing. The dragon and the phoenix are followed by a large area of dazzling light. The Emperor of Heaven and those two people are here. Those two people are Shishen and Fujuxiao. Zhou Yu squinted his eyes slightly and looked over secretly under the dazzling light. Only a glance. I was shocked on the spot. Those two men looked very much like his disciples in profile. At this moment, all the gods in the nine heavens stood up to greet him. Welcome the first god. Welcome the Emperor of Heaven. Welcome the little fairy. Fujuxiao was still hiding behind Yan Sushui happily. He was no weaker than Shishen, as he was willing to be her shadow. Xiaoxian Jun is Xiaotian Taoist Fuzian. Now she has not yet transformed into the Dao of Heaven, so she can only be called Xiaoxian Jun. Countless gods stood up and bowed to them. Oh, it would be great if we could enter this ninth level gate. A gate can isolate the breath of heaven and the breath of the first god. If they can get a trace of it, it will be a great opportunity for them. Everyone in Kangguo Palace turned to look at the Sanking sect outside the door. Winked at them with a mocking look on his face. Everyone in the Sanking sect was so angry that their faces were livid. Zhou Yu, however, was stunned while holding the small bell on his waist. What's wrong? Master asked. Zhou Yu glanced at Zhe Kongtian and then at the bell. I seem to feel the disciple's breath. Really? Where is it? Master looked excited. Zhou Yu pointed to the gate of Zhe Zongtian with a bitter laugh. It seems, inside. Everyone in the Sanking sect was stunned. Oh, she just came here. She was held in her lap, and she found the backstage. A group of masters and uncles looked surprised. The words just fell. Then I heard the vast heavenly sound coming from the ninth heaven. I would like to invite the elders from Xiaoxian Jun's master's sect to enter the palace. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 466. Chapter 466, Husband and wife recognize each other. Elders of the division. Xiao Xianjun has never been a master, so where can he get the elders from his master? Her father is the lord of the fallen angel realm, and her mother is the god of creation. How powerful is her master? Everyone's eyes widened. Some people were shocked in a low voice. Master of the way of heaven. This was a chance. A small, delicate, and golden lotus flower flew out from the altar and went straight out of the gate of the nine heavens. Everyone looked at the lotus flower. Then he saw the flower dangling in front of Zhou Yu, who looked confused. Zhou Yu opened his mouth, and after a while he pointed at the nine heavens. Master, my disciple, seems to be up there. As soon as he spread his hands, the little lotus flower fell on his hand. Zhenjun Yuanfeng was standing next to the Emperor of Heaven, his fingertips trembling slightly, and his eyes full of shock and fear. The Emperor of Heaven frowned slightly. Why is Yuanfeng so negligent today? Why don't you go and invite the elders from the little Tiandao master sect to take a seat? Zhenjun Yuanfeng's throat seemed to be blocked, and his steps seemed to weigh 1,000 kilograms, making him unable to lift them up. What did he see? Those poor sword cultivators from the Sanking sect are actually the disciples of Xiao Tiandao. The Emperor of Heaven frowned slightly when he saw him like this. He really loved Yuanfeng and lost his nature. Yuanfeng felt a chill in his heart and stepped forward with a wry smile, his palms becoming sweaty. The Emperor of Heaven bowed his head in front of Shishin and Xiao Shandao. How dare he embarrass the Emperor of Heaven? Taking a deep breath, he walked towards the gate of Zhongtian with heavy steps. He personally took away the invitation letter from the other party. Now, he wants to personally invite him back on behalf of the Emperor of Heaven. Everyone in Kangguo Palace looked pale. They looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. Zhenjun Yuanfeng stood in front of the Sanking sect with a smile on his face. Elders, please take a seat. Yes, he is higher than him. Who can make people have good disciples? Everyone in the Sanking sect was dumbfounded, and the teacher's eyes were wide open. Tutu-ta-sun. Zhou Yu scratched his head. It seems to be her. When the Phoenix Dragon clan took over when she ascended, it should be her. Everyone in the Sanking sect swayed and almost fell to the ground. The Phoenix Dragon clan took over, wasn't it the little Tiandeo? At that time, there was a fight in the God realm in order to pick her up. In the end, the Dragon King and Phoenix Emperor won by luck and sent them there. They were still looking at it with sour eyes, wanting to admire Xiao Tiandeo's figure. As a result, the God realm was so crowded that they saw nothing. This turn. Become the elder of Xiao Tiandeo's disciple? Everyone in the Sanking sect felt like they were in a dream. Mr. Yuanfeng, who had flaunted his power in front of them half an hour ago, with his nose reaching into the sky, would now bow humbly in front of him. It seems like, I've got a great thigh. Teacher Zhou secretly pushed Zhou Yu forward. Zhou Yu nodded lightly towards Zhenjun Yuanfeng, and then led the elders of his disciples towards the front. The further you go, the higher the position of the Divine King becomes and the more popular you are. There was nothing visible on their faces, and their calves were secretly trembling. The 5th level Divine Lord. 6th level Divine Lord. 7th Heavenly Lord. Until, I walked to the Emperor of Heaven. Everyone in the Sanking sect was a little dizzy. I saw the Emperor of Heaven patting the place beside him kindly. Although you are the elders of Xiao Tiandeo in the mortal world, since you have ascended, it means that God has recognized your identity and you should sit with me. Please take your seat. Zhou Yu had a calm expression on his face. In order not to embarrass his disciples, he nodded calmly towards the Emperor of Heaven. The groundhog is already screaming in my heart. Equal to the Emperor of Heaven? Zhenjun Yuanfeng's palms were almost swollen, and he couldn't even hold a smile on his face. Looking helplessly, the group of poor sword cultivators from the Sanking sect sat next to the Emperor of Heaven. Yuanfeng, why don't you show tea to some of the elders? Yuanfeng was so angry that he actually had to serve them tea and water. The Kangguo Palace disciple sitting in the corner looked pale and could not even express hatred or jealousy. They were able to sit with the Emperor of Heaven, and their master even had to pour tea for each other. They actually want to drag each other into Kangguo Palace. If they really enter Kangguo Palace, then little heaven will tear them apart alive. Everyone felt a chill all over their bodies, and their minds were slightly unsteady. Zhou Yu looked towards the top position. A pair of young men and women with extremely outstanding looks but rather kind expressions were nodding towards him. He stood up in a hurry and bowed to the two of them. He knew that this was the God who sacrificed and saved the world. Lord of all things. Beside them, there sat a pretty little girl, about 16 or 17 years old, with cold eyebrows. She sensed her own gaze and looked over. Punched her lips lightly towards him. Sure enough, it was his little disciple Ling Miao in the mortal world. Oh my God, Ling Miao is actually the incarnation of the way of heaven. How virtuous is he that he has become the master of heaven. He was lucky enough to guide her into Taoism. At the same time, she was full of fear, but fortunately she was not led astray. Welcome the little immortal Lord. Congratulations to the little immortal Lord for his return from calamity. All the gods stood up and worshipped the little fairy one after another. Countless treasures of heaven and earth were presented to them as if they were free of charge, but the little fairy didn't even take a look at them. As if to her, everything is commonplace. Zhou Yu shook his head. Why didn't he understand? This kid never loved money. She couldn't even choose a natal spiritual sword that was right for her. Thinking about it now, I am afraid that there is no spiritual sword in the world to match her, so she can only use spiritual energy as a sword. The 9 heavens are full of joy. Except Kangguya Palace and true Lord Yuan Feng. Suddenly, there was a noise outside the Zhongtian gate. The Emperor of Heaven frowned slightly. It was Emperor Junhua who had arrived. Junhua had a very good relationship with Shishen back then, but later they parted ways due to different paths. At that time, Yan Sushui was even forced to sacrifice. The relationship between the two of us has not been close in recent years. If you come here now, you are afraid of causing trouble. He pursed his lips toward Holy Lord Yuyuan. Holy Lord Yuyuan picked up a cup of fairy tea, took a sip happily, and shook his head towards the Emperor of Heaven. Looking at a show with a smile. The Emperor of Heaven frowned in anger. Dai Junhua and his companions have not arrived yet, but Yin arrived first. What are you going to do to her? Aren't words enough to alert you? Emperor Junhua couldn't suppress his anger. Heavenly Dao, since she is destined to exist beyond the 3 realms in the future, then she cannot have any emotions, let alone have any entanglements with the 3 realms. If you still have sense, you should lock her up until she becomes the Taoist. The Tao is the Tao, there is no need to experience any human feelings. Dai Junhua came with great momentum. Sushui suddenly turned cold. You're speaking lightly? Then my daughter should dedicate herself to the 3 realms, and should she die when she is born, she was locked up at birth and had no companionship during those long years. Who gave her a chance to choose? Dai Junhua looked indifferent. If you can't do it, I will help you do it. So that you don't make a big mistake again, Emperor Junhua immediately held his sword. The tip of the sword pointed sharply at Xiao Tiandao behind Yan Sushui. Xiao Tiandao's figure paused slightly, revealing the mother's face from behind. The delicate slap on the big cheek made the angry-faced Emperor Junhua's breathing become stagnant. The tip of the sword trembled. Little fish. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 467. Chapter 467. The Humble Emperor. Dai Junhua's hands trembled, and the long sword pointed at her fell to the ground with a clang. Dai Junhua only felt short of breath, and there was a thin and dense pain at the tip of his heart that he could not ignore. Almost even breathing felt like 1,000 arrows piercing my heart. The person he cares about is standing in the center right now. He was looking at him with an indifferent expression. What's going on with the Emperor? He enters the Tao with a sword, why can't he even hold the sword steady? That's right, he and Shishin have been friends for many years, and they were even brother and sister back then. Dai Junhua looked at Xiao Yu'er closely. Without blinking an eye, it was as if he was facing a lost and found treasure. Fujuk Xiao was dressed in black, and his eyebrows were slightly wrinkled at this moment. He is a man, so he naturally understands Junhua's eyes. He couldn't help but step forward, blocking his view of his daughter. Junhua, if you want to fight, I will accompany you. But if you want to lock my daughter into the abyss where the sun will never be seen, I won't allow it. Fujuk Xiao spread his hands, and the spiritual sword appeared from his hands. Junhua took a step back. Slightly pale complexion. No, Quan Xiao enters the abyss of the God realm. No. There is no daylight, no sun and moon all year round, no living creatures, only endless strong winds. How dare he shut Xiao Yu'er in? He even regretted that he had just said this. Emperor Junhua saw Xiao Yu'er's cold face, and his heart hurt so much that he could hardly breathe. Xiao Yu'er, however, walked around his father and walked to the front. He gently bent down and picked up the spiritual sword on the ground. Don't touch it. Emperor Junhua's spiritual sword is an ancient divine sword. No one else can touch it. Before he finished speaking, Xiao Yu'er picked up the spiritual sword. All the gods were stunned. Yu Lao hid in a corner, hoping that no one would see him. Si Mingxing Jun even raised his hands to cover his face and crept out secretly. Pick up your sword and point it at me. Xiao Yu held the tip of the sword. Put the hilt of the sword toward Emperor Junhua. Junhua, who had been domineering and full of anger just now, was retreating step by step. There was a bit of fear and distress on his face. He kept shaking his head and retreating. Xiao Yu, I can't do anything to you. Emperor Junhua's face was full of bitterness, almost numb with heartache. Xiao Yu sneered lightly, with a flash of sarcasm in his eyes. Junhua looked at her dreamily. Miss her so much. Miss her so much. Missing her crazily. I miss the time when she called me brother Mingxian, and the time when she would always sneak into her bed and show a sly smile when she was a child. I miss the time when she secretly brought snacks from home and the snacks were crushed to pieces. I miss everything with her. Every day and night in the past, he fell asleep relying on the past with Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu chuckled and threw the sword at his feet. Everyone was shocked. Junhua was actually forced to retreat steadily by a little girl. How is this going? Emperor Junhua couldn't even raise his head in front of her. Fujuxiao and Yan Sushui looked at each other, and both of them had serious expressions on their faces. Fujuxiao squeezed Sushui's hand to calm her down. I'm afraid that these two people will have entanglements in the mortal world. I'm sorry, Xiao Yu, I'm sorry. There were thousands of things he wanted to say in his heart, but seeing Xiao Yu's indifference, his heart was as sharp as a knife and he couldn't say a word. I can only say sorry over and over again. Junhua staggered out of Zhongtian. Zhou Yu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. When he saw Emperor Junhua, he almost jumped up. When Mingxian turned out to be Emperor Junhua. Fortunately, his disciples were not confused. The celebration banquet will be held as usual. It wasn't until evening that all the guests left, and Yan Sushui took her daughter back to the palace worriedly. In front of the palace, stood Emperor Junhua. Junhua, who is still so graceful as usual, is actually in a state of embarrassment at this moment. He prayed and followed Xiao Yu, but was stopped by Fujuxiao. Junhua, it was you who cut off ties and severed ties back then, and now it's you who are clinging to me. What on earth are you going to do? Fujuxiao looked serious, with a bit of anger. Yanyan is born with the will of heaven and is destined to end love, and love we treated her better when she still had feelings. Do you want to stop us too? Hearing the end of love, Junhua turned pale. End of love, absolute love. Junhua murmured in a low voice. But he didn't look at Fujuxiao and Yan Sushui, he only looked at Xiao Yu dreamingly. After I killed my wife and became enlightened, I actually never had a day of peace. I thought that what I wanted was revenge and immortality. Until I killed my wife and preached, until I got my revenge, I didn't have any happiness. Days and nights were the days I spent with you in the past. Xiao Yu, it's my fault, I owe you. Just look at me again, okay? Junhua wanted to reach out and pull the little fish. But it was split open by Fujuxiao with a palm. Junhua, pay attention to your identity. Fujuxiao was horrified. He actually, in this mortal world. At this moment, the way he looked at Junhua showed that there was no trace of the brotherly friendship in the past. He seemed to be fierce and a little angry. At the same time, my heart was filled with shock. Junhua has always been aloof and disdainful of love. But at this moment, he was following his daughter humbly, just asking her to look back. Humble to the extreme. Xiao Yu turned her back to him. I gave you a chance. One chance, never look back. After saying that, he entered the palace. The door was closed heavily in front of Emperor Junhua. Junhua stood outside the palace in despair. The divine king, who had never been touched by dust, the aloof nine-heaven son of God, was actually infected with lust. Do you think I deserve it? Junhua's voice was hoarse and his figure was shabby. Fujixiao's eyes narrowed. If he was not facing his daughter today, he would really like to laugh 3 times. Laughing at him and slapping him in the face. The cabbage he wanted to eat was from his own family. Fujixiao's eyes widened and she wished she could eat him. It turns out that Zion is your love calamity, Fujixiao counted with his fingers. What was not true before is now clear. Fujixiao's face turned pale as he thought of the horoscope he had written. Damn it, it was his daughter who suffered. He wished he could hammer him to death. Sushui's face was dark, and Emperor Junhua, who didn't know what it felt like, was actually emotional. The other party is still her daughter. This is nonsense. Sushui gritted her teeth. You said you wanted to sever the brother-sister relationship with us, so you want to be my son-in-law. Little white teeth almost broke. Mom, you shouldn't let go of a brother of your own generation. You want to be your son. Junhua couldn't even lift his head. Half an hour ago, he was still arrogantly blaming the 2 people, but now. Junhua lowered his head slightly in front of the 2 people. Father. Mother. Snapped. Fujixiao knocked him away with one palm. Junhua vomited several mouthfuls of blood. Emperor Junhua often said that things in the world will end in this world. All relationships in the world should be broken after ascending. I hope the emperor will set an example. Yan Sushui's eyes were full of threats. Emperor Junhua is in charge of the laws of the 3 realms, and he is most selfless. In previous years, if I experienced a calamity and missed his mortal relatives after ascending, this is what he would advise. Now, you are reaping the bitter consequences. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 468. Chapter 468, Belated affection is worse than grass. Little immortal lord, Emperor Junhua has sent me the most precious treasure from the immortal mountain. Xiao Zianjun, Emperor Junhua gave me the Dingai divine pearl of the East China Sea. Little immortal lord, Emperor Junhua gave you the Yaokai sacred tree. Little immortal lord, Emperor Junhua gave you the Qianglei immortal clothes. Little immortal lord, Emperor Junhua has been kneeling outside the palace for 7 days. Xiao Zianko secretly looked at Xiao Zianjun. Xiaoxianjun is so good looking, but he is also really hard working. She is devoted to the Tao, and nothing can distract her. If he wants to kneel down, he will kneel down. It has nothing to do with me. Xiao Yuer was wearing a white skirt, sitting cross-legged in front of the couch, her brows full of gentleness. Yan Sushui and Fujixiao looked at each other and shook their heads slightly. Sushui stepped forward and hugged her daughter gently. The daughter was stunned and buried her head in her mother's arms. The daughter is now 15 or 16 years old. She looks petite and cute, but inside she is rare and calm. You are not at all different from my mother. My mother is a confused person who has been confused since she was a child without 3 souls and 7 souls. Sushui was mentally retarded for a long time. As for you, you have a very calm temperament. You have been like this since you were a child. In order to stay with my parents, I tricked the gods of the 3 realms, and finally stayed as I wished. I have my own ideas at a young age. Mom doesn't advise you, but I hope you can live for yourself and not be bound by your status as a god. If you don't want to, my parents will risk their lives to let you live the life you want. Sushui's eyes were full of pity. Her daughter, only a few years old, will be thrown into reincarnation and experience life, separation, and death. Feel the entanglement of love and hate. Being. Killing his wife proves the truth. She wished she could bear all this for her. Being the god of creation yourself, you are at least the master of the 3 realms. You can travel the mountains and rivers and see the prosperity of the world. And what about the daughter? The way of heaven and the creator god are different. To become a god, you have to go through countless hardships, have no desires or demands, be ruthless and loveless, and be extremely fair. Even the love between parents must be given up. Xiao Ziyan, however, raised his head and smiled at his mother. Mom, I'm so happy with it. I want to feel the breath of every inch of the land, and listen to the news brought by every gust of wind. Mother, I like everything in the three worlds. I love everything in the world. Her tone was sincere, without any grievance. She was very happy. What about him? Sushui looked outside the hall door. Dai Junjunhua just wanted to see her. Xiao Ziyan raised his head and looked outside the hall, blinking his eyes. Mother, once, he was my sentient being. Now he is a member of all sentient beings. I love every one of my subjects equally. She slowly withdrew her eyes, her heart calm. Fujuxiao didn't know whether to be happy or sad for Junhua. The most terrifying thing is not resentment, but forgetfulness and meaninglessness. You are no different from everyone else. Mom supports all your principles. Sushui touched her head. Huizi is about to take over. How about going down to see him tomorrow? Sushui asked softly. Okay, Xiao Ziyan responded with a smile. Emperor Junhua outside the door was in despair. A gorgeous parrot flew out from the 9 heavens. Please leave, Emperor. We have broken up our friendship, and I hope you will take it seriously. The little parrot chirped, and Emperor Junhua's lips trembled slightly. The supreme god, who was worshipped and looked up to by the gods, was kneeling humbly outside the temple at this moment. Don't care about the gossip from the outside world. Xiao Yuer, I sent your love root back. Can you give me another chance? Xiao Yuer. Emperor Junhua held the love root in his hand. This is the love root he pulled out from the twins back then. Now, he has sent it back. The gate to the 9 heavens opens. A flash of joy flashed across Emperor Junhua's face. Xiao Yuer, I have sent my love back. Can you, let me give it a try? Xiao Yuer, can you let me make up for my past mistakes? I've put the broken jade back together. Kingan, can you also let me send it back again? Xiao Yuer paused in his steps and frowned slightly. She said nothing. Only stretched out a smooth arm. Dai Junjunhua took a deep breath and staggered up, holding the roots of love in his hands as if they were holding a treasure. Slowly fell into Xiao Yuer's arms. Objects returned to their original owners. Who knew that when he returned to his true nature, there was no harmony at all, and instead he started to struggle fiercely. The root of love continued to struggle, but it was directly broken in front of Emperor Junhua. It turned into strands of pure spiritual energy and spread throughout the world. No. No, how could this happen? How could this happen? How could it backfire? How could this happen? Emperor Junhua almost collapsed. He tried to send his love back to Xiao Yuer so that she could regain her ability to love. Kei Kingan was completely destroyed. Emperor, love is moved by the heart. Once the heart is dead, the roots of love cannot be regenerated. Xiao Yuer's voice was shallow and his eyes were clear. The eyes that looked at him no longer had the admiration and brilliance that they once had. The emperor seemed to have lost a large piece of his heart. It can never be recovered. He knew that he had lost her. Really lost her. The chance she gave him back then was the only chance he could have to have her. Dai Junjunhua's eyes were red. Xiao Yuer, I was wrong. Give me a chance to make up for it, okay? I don't want any fame, fortune, or sentient beings in the 3 realms. Xiao Yuer, I just want you. Xiao Yuer, I don't want anything else. Please, look at me. Can you look at me? Emperor Junhua was humble to the extreme. The little Taoist boy's eyes were red and he could hardly stand. Emperor, the little fairy has left. Let's go back. Emperor. The Taoist boy almost cried. The emperor was deeply in love and couldn't extricate himself. This is how to do. The emperor was confused and followed the Taoist boy back to the heavenly palace in a daze. The little Taoist boy saw that the emperor was in bad condition, so he quickly invited Holy Lord Yuyuan. Holy Lord Yuyuan, please save the emperor. The emperor has failed in all the calamities. Now, his character has changed greatly. The Taoist boy invited Holy Lord Yu Yuan and retreated. Holy Lord Yu Yuan couldn't help but sigh when he saw the embarrassed Junhua. Junhua, I never thought you would become like this. The emperor, who looked down on all living beings, would humbly kneel in front of her door, just begging her to see you. When that little girl appeared, Junhua, your red Luan star started beating like crazy. I originally wanted to remind you, but at that time you were dismissive of the 7 emotions and 6 desires. If I reminded you, I'm afraid it would be self-defeating. Just waiting to let nature take its course, but I don't expect that you are still stuck so deeply. Holy Lord Yu Yuan took out a white porcelain bottle from his arms. Drink. This is the pure water I brought back from taking Tianmo Chusi. Drink it and you will forget everything. Holy Lord Yu Yuan was a little sad. Every who ascends must go to the Ma Chusi to wash away the dust and emotions all over his body. Even gods have more or less emotions and desires. The Ma Chusi is gentle and calm, but if there are 7 emotions and 6 desires, the sea water will corrode flesh and bones. The more serious the affair, the more painful it will be. And Emperor Junhua walked through it without any damage. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 469. Chapter 469 Crossing the Ma Chusi. Now, I'm afraid I won't be able to cross the Ma Chusi. Emperor Junhua held the porcelain bottle with his fingertips, his mouth bitter. The ascended gods will cross the Ma Chusi in 3 days. Emperor, please drink it first to avoid suffering. Tomorrow we will cross the Ma Chusi. Holy Lord Yu Yuan couldn't figure out how much emotion he had given, so he only secretly brought pure water in an attempt to make him forget his love in advance. K. Junhua, is he willing? Forget the little fish, forget all the warmth in the world. The emperor held the pure bottle and opened the mouth of the bottle. Suddenly the room was filled with fragrance. How did the outside world spread the news? The emperor asked lightly. Holy Lord Yu Yuan was startled, and then said, so you also know that your behavior is out of line. Holy Lord Yu Yuan sat on the chair carelessly. There are rumors from the outside that the emperor has failed in all the calamities and is haunted by inner demons. They say you are crazy. No one believed that he really fell in love with Xiao Tiandao. After all, Emperor Junhua is the one who hates the sight of gods having an affair. Junhua's face was filled with bitterness. You know, when she was in the mortal world, she always wouldn't let me look at other girls. She always shouted that I am her husband-in-law. Others joked that I am her little husband-in-law. At that time, I was young and ignorant. I couldn't bear to hear outsiders' jokes and ridicules, and scolded her for being shameless at such a young age. The little girl only asked one question at that time, do you feel ashamed that I am your wife? Or is it shameful for you to be tied to me? How did you answer that time? He said yes. Later, she never said again, this is my husband-in-law. Even the words brother Mingxian seemed to have become much colder to her. I have too many regrets, Emperor Junhua said with a wry smile. Does it surprise you that I knelt in front of her door? I killed her with my own hands on our wedding night. When she gave up her practice, gave up everything, and decided to grow old with me kneeling in front of her door counts. What? I don't have time anymore. Once she really becomes the way of heaven, there will be no way to reverse it. Yu Yuan, I don't have time anymore. Emperor Junhua didn't dare to delay it any longer, he couldn't afford it. He held the white porcelain bottle, and the pure water flowed down, fell straight to the ground, and then disappeared instantly. Holy Lord Yu Yuan moved his lips, but finally said nothing. Early on the next morning, Xiao Yuer went to Ma Chusi. After we cross the Ma Chusi, we will go home and reunite with Huaiji. Sushui hugged her daughter, and Fujuxiao stood behind her. Dad, Mother, my daughter will leave early and come back early. Xiao Yu'er smiled. The Machu Sea is endless and sparkling. Every who has ascended has crossed the Machu Sea. I still remember that you founded Machu He. You said that God loves the world and should wash away all the dust after ascending. You had it easy back then, but I almost lost half my life. Fujuxiao held Sushui's hand, her eyes full of nostalgia. Sushui's eyebrows arched and her eyes widened slightly. At that time, did you become interested? Fujuxiao whispered, no, in the desolate world, you were still a stone. Sushui gave him a disgusted look. You don't have any fetish for stones, do you? Fujuxiao stretched out her index finger and lightly flicked her eyebrows. Even when teasing her, he was reluctant to do anything harsh. Sushui, nothing in the world is important to me. I am only here for you. The two looked at each other and smiled. Xiao Yu'er stood next to Ma Chuhai, surrounded by many gods watching the ceremony. When I crossed the Machu Sea, I almost burned my skin off. Ha ha ha, you kid is so impure and has so many emotions. The more worried you are, the more you will suffer. When I crossed, the water was like thousands of silver needles, which hurt my heart. Xiao Xianjun is young and is most ignorant. I'm afraid he will suffer, everyone whispered. There were about 6 or 7 people in the same group who went to the upper realm. Elder Zhu Qing and head Zhou Yu were also among them. The extradition presided over the ceremony for several people, and Xiao Yu'er stood at the front to accept the extradition and sprinkled willow branches with purifying water. This pure water is so comfortable, Elder Zhu Qing said in a low voice. After the purified water was spread, the little fish took a few people into the Machu Sea. Xiao Yu'er took off his shoes and socks, and when his white feet landed on Machu Hai, there was nothing strange about his little face. The clever little fairy has a good nature, everyone couldn't help but praise him. Even gods will bring earthly causes and effects with them when they come back from calamities, and there will be things that are difficult to let go of. The gods who have just ascended are even more so. But Xiao Xianjun was not worried at all. Zhou Yu breathed a sigh of relief, and he couldn't help but look at Emperor Junhua behind him. Sure enough, the emperor's face turned pale. Zhou Yu curled his lips and entered the Sea of Machu with Zhu Qing. He is Xiao Yu'er's master, and he also knows best the connection between Xiao Yu'er and the emperor in the mortal world. How could he not be happy when he saw that Xiao Yu'er had no worries in his heart? Oh, this group of disciples all have very good character. Everyone was a little surprised. There is still Emperor Junhua who has not yet entered the water. The speaker waved his hand, not to mention the emperor. In the entire 3 realms, he is the most severe and disdainful of personal relationships. Back then, when there was a named Sifan, he threw the other person directly into the Machu Sea, and he was in agony. Finally, he skinned the other person. Immortal bones have conquered the mortal world. It is impossible for the emperor to be emotional. All the gods nodded. But a few days ago, he was kneeling outside the Xiaoxianjun palace. The speaker hesitated for a moment. Over the years, the emperor has always been dignified and steady. This is the first time I have seen him lose his composure. The inner demon has not passed, but I am afraid it will affect the emperor. Everyone couldn't help but nod. The emperor is going to the Machu Sea. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the emperor walking straight towards Machu Sea. It is said to be Machu Sea, but in fact it is not deep, only reaching the level of the knees. The emperor's face was expressionless, and the moment his feet landed in the water, his body froze. The emperor walked forward step by step, his face showing no trace of anything. His forehead was covered with thin beads of cold sweat. The emperor is indeed an emperor, how could he be so emotional? Lord Yushin said with a smile. You see, the emperor has no obstacles at all. The more serious the love, the more difficult it is to go to Machu Lake. Before he could finish his words, Someone shouted loudly. Look! Everyone was stunned. They all looked towards Ma Chuhai. On the calm lake surface, a trace of blood appeared on the transparent Ma Chu Sea. Everyone looked along the blood stains. It's the Emperor. I saw bright red blood stains wherever the Emperor passed by. His figure was already swaying slightly, his back was slightly bent, and he was sweating heavily. Behind him, there was a lot of blood. The Emperor is emotional, someone murmured. This Ma Chuhai is the one who washes away personal feelings and dust. The stronger the love, the more poisonous it becomes to Ma Chuhai. Then, he knelt in front of Xiaoxian Jun's door. Everyone's hearts were shocked. The Emperor was emotional. Moreover, the other party is Xiao Tiandao, who has just ascended. His eyes unconsciously fell on Xiao Tiandao in front of him. The little girl's back was straight, her eyes were straight, and she moved forward without any hesitation. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 470. Chapter 470, Hard to drink ruthless water. Dai Junhua almost died. Ma Chuhai read. With each step he took, more blood entered the water. At the end, Emperor Junhua almost moved forward step by step. Holy Lord Yuyuan closed his eyes and clenched his fists. He thought that Junhua would be tempted, and at most it would only shake Dao's heart. But don't want to. It's so powerful. Nearly to the point of destroying him. Dai Junhua was trembling all over. Every step he took was like stepping on a knife, which hurt his bones. But the real pain is the figure in front of you who never looks back. Her steps didn't even pause. He didn't know how long he had been walking in the sea, but he only knew that the water below was blood red. His legs seemed to have lost all feeling. When we walked out of Ma Chu Sea, our feet were exposed out of the water, and only bones were left. The clanking white bones were stained with blood, and his whole body was shaking. This Ma Chu Sea can indeed be crossed with ruthless people, but it is difficult to cross with sentimental people. The little Taoist boy burst into tears when he saw him coming out. Emperor, why are you doing this? Drink the pure water. Emperor, please drink the pure water. You said that the 7 emotions and 6 desires are taboo for the gods, have you forgotten? Emperor, the past life has passed. The things in this world are over. Forget it. This is all what you said, please drink the pure water, Emperor. Emperor. Little Taoist boy had never seen the Emperor look like this before, and he was extremely scared. All the gods stood there blankly. It seems unimaginable that the aloof, cold, and ruthless Emperor could be so humble. The Emperor frowned slightly, sighed, and waved his hand, go away, gods. The gods bowed and then withdrew in an orderly manner. Zhu Qing and Zhou Yu were stunned for a moment, and finally left with their master. Holy Lord Yuyuan stood still and did not move. Dai Junhua was covered in blood and his face was pale, but his eyes still fell on Xiao Yuer. Little Yuer, not even the hem of her skirt got wet. She didn't even look at Junhua, she just smiled at her parents who were waiting for her, stepped forward and took their hands, and rushed down to Dai Viet. No one knows better than him what this means. After Xiao Yuer left, the Emperor of Heaven no longer avoided anything. Junhua, you are an old divine king who has been around for tens of thousands of years. You know better than anyone else what you should do and what you shouldn't do. That's just a calamity for you. Drink the pure water. The Emperor of Heaven sighed and looked at Emperor Junhua. At that time, Shi Shen converted to the 3 realms, and Fujuxiao rebelled against the God realm. The only one who could hold up the situation was Junhua. But he had no intention of becoming the Emperor of Heaven, and eventually supported himself in the throne. Only when the 3 realms are in danger, he appears occasionally. The Emperor of Heaven has always missed his old love. Back then, you advised us to pour clean water into Yan Sushui and Fujuxiao. Why can't you do it yourself now? The authorities are obsessed with the beholder. Junhua, you know how to choose, the Emperor of Heaven said in a low voice. Junhua took a deep breath, smelling blood all over his body, and smiled softly. Look, she doesn't even look at me. Back then, I had a small cut on my hand, and she burst into tears of distress. She hurriedly blew it with her mouth. Junhua said in a low voice. Don't bring matters from the mortal world to the divine realm. Junhua, the emperor's eyes flashed slightly. There are always countless gods in the divine world going through calamities in the lower realms. Some gods are attached to the mortal world. Whenever Emperor Junhua will personally bring clean water to feed them to drink to cut off the entanglements in the world. Now that it's my turn, why is it so difficult? Countless gods have perished in the three realms, and now is the time when everything is waiting to be revived. The realm of gods cannot be separated from the emperor, nor can it be separated from the way of heaven. The emperor was silent for a long time before speaking with difficulty. The first god sacrificed, the gods fell, the heavens collapsed, and the three realms were in danger. Emperor, you. The Emperor of Heaven slowly drew out a sword. You are not allowed to interfere with Xiao Tiandao's return to his position. The Emperor of Heaven inserted his sword in front of Junhua. The corner of the Emperor's mouth was a little bitter. Back then, he had always been the villain himself. Now, it's my turn. You can take care of yourself. The Emperor turned and left. Holy Lord Yu Yuan helped Junhua up, and a soft light fell on the Emperor. The injury on the Emperor's body suddenly improved a lot. Ma Chuhai is not only hurting his body, but also his soul. I can heal your body, but I can't heal your soul. The pain in your soul is worse than your body. Junhua, I don't know how to advise you, but, Holy Lord Yu Yuan sighed. She obviously has no interest in you. Junhua's face turned pale. Yeah, this is the most important thing. She has no intention of doing anything to herself. At this moment, the little fish is happily following his mother. Mom, is your pregnancy taller than mine? Does he still remember me? Xiao Yuer followed Sushui with a look of anticipation. Silly boy. He doesn't just remember you. You are twins from the same mother. Your parents failed in their duties and you depended on each other for life. Your existence is much more important to him than your parents, Sushui said sourly. But he also understood that Fujuxiao was determined to save her when he sacrificed himself. The relationship between two children relying on each other is incomparable to outsiders. Xiao Xian's lips curled up into a smile. The avenues are endless, and there are countless small worlds. The passage of each world is different. Counting it, you are only 16 years old now. Sushui held her daughter's hand. There are countless avenues, and her daughter does not know how many more tribulations she will have to go through. Only then can you prove the truth. When little Xian followed his mother to the mortal world, the smell of mortal fireworks suddenly sounded in his ears. Xiao Xian was in a trance for a moment. Fujuxiao and Sushui wanted to buy whatever they saw along the way for their daughter. Xiao Xian looked calm, which made Sushui a little worried. Don't you like it? Mom, I don't know what you like. Sushui's eyes were a little red. She owed this child the most. Xiao Xian took her mother's hand and said with joy on her face, Yanyan is happiest when he is reunited with his family. Everything in the world is external to the body, and Yanyan does not value it. Sushui and Fujuxiao looked at each other and had no choice but to take her back to the palace. She was born to do the way of heaven. Sushui walked behind, and Fujuxiao nodded slightly. After all the calamity, even the naughtiness on my body has been washed away. I have become calmer and calmer. I don't know if it's good or bad. Sushui sighed. Cause and effect in this world are intertwined. I died for the creation of the world, and was resurrected by the gods. I am afraid that from the moment of resurrection, My existence is to give birth to the way of heaven. Sushui finally understood the cause and effect. Fujuxiao squeezed her palm. No, you exist for yourself. No one lives for others. We are all independent individuals and can choose our own life. Why not be selfish? The three realms are not your responsibility. No one is born to devote himself to the three realms and die. Sushui didn't speak for a while. Everyone wants me to love the three realms and all sentient beings. Only you can teach me to love myself. End of this chapter.